The whole time you're in one of these places, it's pins and needles. You always have in the back of your mind, who am I going to run into or what am I going to see?
Definitely inhabitants of people. I've definitely bumped into a person or two here and there. Inhabitants of animals, lots of animals in these areas.
I've heard of people breaking bones. I've heard of people putting nails through their feet. There are people that have died doing this. Light painting and urban exploration, or what some people call Urbex, well, people would mostly clump that into one category, or people who don't know, but when you actually are getting out there and learning the two different groups of these are people that do urban exploration, these are people that do light painting, you learn that they're two very different things.
You have people that like to go into tunnels, in urban areas. There's people that like to go and climb, bridges and stuff like that. Me, I'm more of the abandoned urban type. I like doing photography in abandoned urban areas, and then I like to utilize lights, which is called light painting, and it conveys a certain meaning to the photo.
Even though I guess light painters do urban exploration, the traditional urban exploration person or someone who partakes in it, they're just casually out there just for the thrill of being in empty spaces, basically just going places where people are afraid to go, kind of like an adrenaline high type of thing because of the dangers involved with being in these places. Whereas a light painter is going into these places at night and trying to take something that is pretty much left for dead and bringing it back to life and capturing its essence and telling a story through that portrayal. When I first started doing the urban exploration, I was in California and my brother came out for a visit, and my roommate at the time had found out about this abandoned cannery. We went out there, all three of us out there at night, and went into this place not really knowing what the heck we were doing, but just knowing that getting out there and doing it was the only way that we were going to get better.
And we had to walk through this this area, and we had boots on and everything, but we didn't have any steel toe or anything. So when my brother was walking through this one area, it was filled with like different debris of like wood and stuff like that, and there was nails sticking out. So he accidentally stepped on a nail. I mean, luckily it didn't go through his foot, otherwise he had to go get a tetanus shot. But I mean, it was a pretty close call because that almost put an end to our whole entire shoot that night. I mean, it was just right at the beginning of the night. I mean, stuff like this happens, in the field, and I mean, if it does happen, I mean, there's no way you can keep on pushing on or anything. You have to just go and, I mean, if you hurt yourself, that's it. You have to get out of there.
And at the time, I was using a little 35mm camera. I found out that when you have a film camera, light painting's not that easy. That's when I started realizing that the way for me to do it, based on the equipment that I had and learning my equipment's strengths and weaknesses, I decided to hone in on the daylight, these structures, these places, these spaces in their natural setting during the day. And after I moved back to Wisconsin, I decided to join a photography program and ended up at Milwaukee Area Technical College. And one of the first classes I was in was a view camera techniques class. And this opened my world up to something I never thought possible. I heard of view cameras, but I never really knew what they were. And come to find out, this is the tool of the architectural photographer, the photographer who wants to make their building the most precise and pristine way they possibly can. And this fit right in to with what I thought all the time, like when I was shooting these places. And it was the tool of the photographers of old, the photographers that came from generations before, and still this tool is valid. The first thing that I was drawn to was the story behind the structure and how these once bustling buildings of operation are now just vacant, well, I guess kind of like playlands for the modern day artist. You go in there and there's street art, and then there's the light painters coming on top that are making photography art.
Some people like to argue that graffiti is, kind of vandalizing the structure and taking away from the structure, but what I like to think of it is that it actually adds a little bit to the structure as well. I mean, yeah, they are, vandalizing by spraying, whatever they want to spray paint on the walls, but at the same time, you can actually utilize those different colors and the different tags and stuff like that to your advantage. I mean, you can take advantage of those things by, photographing it, with different lighting schemes and stuff like that. And I mean, some of that spray paint actually interacts well with the flashes that I use. So I actually look forward to actually finding a good tag that I can actually light paint, because it's just an interaction that you wouldn't get otherwise if the wall was just completely bare and blank.
One thing you do not do is break and enter. The only way in is if there is a point of access, like if there's locks on every single door and if every single window is in that building, you do not go into that. You do not break into it. You do not. That is just against every code with this line of business. And you're just basically trying to scope out the structure's overall integrity as well. I mean, how safe is this really to go in? How much are the four walls really still doing, so to speak?
I mean, I even heard stories of people, dying, falling through multi-level, structures and stuff like that. So I mean, none of this stuff can be really taken lightly. You have to be careful when you go in these areas.
In some sections you can see through the floor, from the third floor all the way down into the basement. So you're talking 4 stories roughly, and you gotta watch your step. You need to remember that these places will bite if not paid attention to. And also on top of it, you don't think of this either because there's no one there telling you, but these buildings were made during a time of lesser restrictions on certain chemicals and such like that. So a lot of these places will have asbestos in them where you have to wear a mask. Some people like to wear goggles even.
And you don't want that getting inside your lungs. That's just awful. I mean, so you always want to take a mask with you. But I mean, other dangers that are known in these areas are broken glass, falling debris, and just different hazardous chemicals. I mean, there's so many different things that you have to watch out for, and that's why it's always good to always research the area before you go into it, so you know what to prepare for before you go in.
On occasions, we found things that are a little strange. We found old pictures of people who had stowed them away. We have found beds from where people had been sleeping in there.
Me and my brother were in Sacramento, and we were shooting an old paddle cruiser that was actually abandoned on the Sacramento River. And me and my buddy and my brother were, climbing around the paddle cruiser, and we came across a bed that was inside there. But what was really weird is that there were fresh eggs laying next to this bed. It was really weird, and it set me back a little bit to think that someone was actually living in this boat. And I mean, when we were shooting it, I mean, we actually got an eerie feeling as if someone was watching us as we were shooting it, because as I was crawling around on the boat and like looking around and looking for a different shot here and there, we actually heard a rock get thrown into the water, and it seemed as if the person was who was actually living on this boat was actually watching us, because it just seemed really weird that this rock came flying out of nowhere and landed in the middle of the water, and that it just came from nowhere. So I mean, I'd have to assume that it was someone who was watching us and knew that, you know, we were there and, you know, looking around. I think they just wanted us just to leave the area, and which we did. So,
well, enough was enough at that point, and we packed it up and went on home, and that's about where that goes. To give people their space.
My brother and a buddy of mine were going into a rural farmhouse. I mean, we were just going in there to shoot a couple of shots. We were just looking for, you know, something to do, you know, inside there. So I mean, we started exploring around, and when we first entered the house, we noticed a huge syringe on it was like on the table in the kitchen, which was kind of creepy. As we started to progress through the house and started to look around a little bit more, we started going upstairs, and then what we ended up finding was a couple hidden rooms, numerous hidden rooms that were hidden behind walls and stuff like that, a hidden stairwell as well. And it makes me wonder, like, why are these rooms hidden behind walls? It's kind of weird. Like, that's not normal.
One factor that we always have to remember in this whole equation is the time of year. It seems like these buildings take on their own kind of own personality with each season change. In summer, it's kind of the season of who's moving in, so to speak. Spring is nice because it's kind of that happy medium. You get the bare side of winter, you know, around places. Trees are still bare, but you get the nice weather, the comfortable environment to work in. Winter is probably the most harsh environment, obviously. Not only is it cold and miserable, you have to wear a lot more clothes, which makes you heavier, which means you're more susceptible to falling through a floor. The snow accumulation on roof, you have to remember that. It can cause for a cave-in. Winter is probably the worst, and fall is always a welcoming sign, because that's usually when people start moving out and you get your free reign.
Me personally, I like the grime and the filth that is involved in these abandoned areas. I really think that like when you're able to make an abandoned area, like, you know, an abandoned industrial area that's all filthy and everything, when you're able to make that look good and pleasing to view, I think you can probably make anything look good. Just by the fact that, I mean, these things, I mean, the textures and stuff like that inside there, I mean, when you don't add the light and you just see it normally, I mean, it looks filthy, it looks disgusting. But I mean, when you start adding light and you start adding different lighting techniques, I mean, it starts bringing out the inner beauty of what an abandoned structure really is. I mean, that's really what I find really attractive about abandoned structures.
There are a lot of places that, I mean, everywhere you look, there's places that are abandoned. And you know, for just anybody, you'd want to jump into any building you find, but there's certain buildings that you look for, and the ones that I personally like are the ones with vast spaces, but have a unique twist with in terms of architecture. I like the old style, old brick, lots of texture, maybe a lot of old painted signs. Peeling paint is very nice aesthetically. And you know, you're looking for something that's going to be able to tell a tale, so you're looking for remnants of what the building once was. Maybe it's desks or old papers or old supplies, or maybe it's old equipment. But these are the things that I like to look for when I'm going into a place, and to help tell the story.
My brother uses film, which is great for his style of photography because he likes to shoot during the day in these abandoned areas, and I think it looks awesome as far as what he does, you know, visually with his photography. And I mean, that's great. But I mean, for me, when I'm at night and I'm doing all this lighting and stuff like that, I have to make sure that I nail the shot, because I mean, the less times you go into these areas, the better. I mean, you don't want to be exposing yourself to these hazards all the time. I mean, I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I don't want to be going into these areas any more than I have to be. Even though I still respect the area and everything, I don't want to go in there like, you know, like a lot of times. So that's where digital comes into play, because I can see the end result right away, and because it's just more convenient as far as like light painting is concerned. It allows me to get the shot that I want in a timely fashion, and then it's just a faster process, I'd say. I use the lights to accent like an object or a structure that I want to take a photo of. So if I'm taking a photo of, like, let's say the inside of the structure or something like that, I'll use different colors to accent different parts of the structure so that your eye follows along the photo. So you're not just pinned in one part of the photo, so that your eye will actually move throughout my photo and it follows the different colors around. That's why I think the main purpose of my lighting is that it brings a vibrant feel to the photo, but it also makes you have to look around the photo at parts of the photo that you wouldn't otherwise maybe look at.
For the two processes, there's they definitely contrast each other quite a bit. I mean, day photography, it's quite easier. It's quite easier to do. You can do it all in one trip if you want to, because you can go in with your camera. Yeah, it would be nice if you knew the area a little bit more, but with day shooting, you can kind of go in there and get a feel for it as you're doing your shots. Whereas night shooting, you have to kind of go during the day and really scout the place out before you start diving into it at night. That's one big difference from when we first started, because the very first place we went into, we did everything at night, and that is something that we probably will not do again unless absolutely necessary. But you need to have a feel for the place. But on the other side too, the day shooting, I find with my particular format, I have to get there well in advance just to set my stuff up. It's much more methodical. But on the other side of it, you know, with night shooting, you also have to set up, you know, your lighting schemes and everything too. So I mean, it's really just a personal preference of the way that you like going about doing it, or, you know, whoever might be shooting. Personally, I like the slow, methodical setup, like daylight type of order of business, Whereas my brother, he's much more about doing lighting schemes and color schemes and all this.
When people ask me why I take the risks when I go into these areas, I mean, it's it's really hard to explain to them, because I mean, some people just think I'm crazy going into some of these areas. But I mean, the reason why I do it is because I try to create an alternate perception for people to view. So when they look at the area, they aren't viewing it just as how the structure looks normally. I'm adding certain lighting techniques and certain photography techniques to the photo that create an alternate, it's almost like an alternate reality of the structure. And in most cases, when people look at abandoned areas, they usually take it for just face value. They don't really look in depth into the area, and they don't ask why that area looks like the way it does. And what I aim to do is I try to make something as ugly as an abandoned structure look like, interesting and aesthetically pleasing to view. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring light to something that most people forget about. I mean, a lot of these structures, they just sit vacant now for years and years, and no one really knows why or how it came to that.
And that's kind of really what has kept me doing it, is because I feel that there are a lot of untold stories with these buildings. There's a lot of, it's almost like a myth about a lot of these places, and they're really left to be forgotten. And I mean, to think that some of these places were like employed thousands of people, and to think that it's just left to be forgotten. I mean, these were people's livelihoods. These were things that people, counted on every day, and now it's just empty. It's just, but that's what keeps you in tune, because you want to tell the story of these people, the people that are, well, I guess kind of forgotten souls in some sense. And it's that need to inform people and kind of remind people of what has happened to our country as it is now. I mean, with the way that the economy is and everything, these are the relics left behind from a system that, in my mind, fails in some way. And I just want people to know the truth of what is going on and really just let it be heard.
I believe it's important to document, certain, especially these areas, especially in the Midwest. I mean, the Midwest was built on industry and, different industrial complexes and stuff like that. I mean, steel, it used to be huge throughout the Midwest. I mean, now you just see all these steel, factories and, manufacturing factories just going under. And I mean, some of these people, it changes how these people live. It changes their livelihood. And I think that's really the essence of why I do it. It brings light to stuff, certain aspects of how society becomes affected by, the deterioration of certain industries and certain, jobs that people had,
The reason for doing this is basically to put into context the story, the way things have happened, where things were, where things are, where things may possibly be going. And you look out and you see vacant lots, and you see empty houses, and you realize that with the fall of these industries came the fall of these communities too. And the business may be gone, but the people still remain, and they're kind of forgotten. And this is kind of our way of bringing attention back to those areas and kind of showing the sad state of affairs at times, and how some things can be so easily overlooked, and when they really shouldn't be. And it's I wish more people would pay attention, and this is kind of my way of just throwing it in their face and saying, you're gonna have to look now.